the UFC will release Demetrious Johnson, allowing him to sign with one.
Why would the UFC dispose of their greatest athlete?
He has the lowest selling pay-per-view in the history of the UFC.
This is potentially groundbreaking news.
I heard you had something to do with it as well.
The idea of a trade in mixed martial arts, can you remember this ever happening?
I love the deal. I love it.
Demetrious Johnson appears to be headed to one, and Ben Askren appears to be headed to the UFC.
The question was, in the waters of another organization, would he sink or would he swim? From a troubling childhood,
He will come out there and put us in the corner and put our hands up.
to greatness. This is the untold story of Demetrious Johnson. Before the trade, there was the most dominant UFC champion in the history of the company.
Wait, you know what synthwave is?
No.
It all started for the legend with the introduction of the flyweight division into the UFC, a 4-man tournament to determine the new, undisputed champion.
Round 1. Fight! Round 2. Fight!
The tournament would place the lofty crown upon the head of a young, hungry Demetrious Johnson, but as the gold belt shimmered around his waist and the arena echoed with thunderous applause, I doubt they understood what this man's future would entail, nor the dark path that led here.
64% of African American children live in fatherless homes.
You've never had a relationship with your father?
Yep, never seen a picture, never seen nothing, but it's part of life, you know?
DJ's life would start a statistical probability for newly born African Americans. Without a father, his mother, in an attempt to provide stability for her children, would find herself between different marriages, looking for a chance to escape the same fate as those others in DJ's small hometown.
My sister told me stories that they lived on the border of Kentucky, and military men would pass by all the time, and your ticket out of there was military man, and that's the way she did, and she would travel. She'd been married multiple times to different military men, so.
But in that search for freedom, a monster would walk through the door.
I had an abusive stepfather who was, military based, putting us in the corner for 15 minutes, getting whipped. One thing it did, it made me mentally tough.
Despite that dark and merciless time spent in childhood, it would shape a resilient, hard-working individual, not cut from the same cloth as the man that failed to raise him. From a scholarship-worthy wrestling and cross-country background to meeting his future wife, Destiny, working at Red Lobster, Johnson was determined to break the cycle of working a monotonous 9-to-5. An avenue would eventually show itself to him in the form of mixed martial arts. Whilst working multiple jobs and the help of his future wife, his hard work would finally pay off. Johnson would see a rise through the sport that showcased glimpses of the greatness to follow.
Decision, Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson!
With a 10-1 record, DJ, despite all the odds against him, had earned his first shot at UFC gold against the consensus bantamweight GOAT, Dominic Cruz.
And still bantamweight champion of the world!
One thing was apparent in the fight, and to be honest his whole career previously, DJ was severely undersized for the division, which in retrospect simply adds to Johnson's legacy. A move up in weight class is often branded as a brave turn in a combat athlete's career, as they attempt to challenge those bigger than them. But for DJ, it was an inherent problem. He was one of the lightest fighters in the lightest division the UFC had, and he wasn't alone in that fact. There were many other fighters undersized and losing not because of talent or skill, but just sheer size. And so it was no surprise when the UFC opened the flyweight division at 125 pounds. Those fighters placed at a disadvantage would migrate down to the new weight class. The UFC crowned its new champion with the aforementioned tournament, and Demetrious may have came out on top, but there were other fighters looking to prove that they were worthy of championship gold. But being worthy doesn't necessarily mean that you are capable. See, Demetrious was destined for greatness, and that belt around his waist wasn't going anywhere. From 5-round slugfests to last-second submissions, knockouts and flying armbars, Johnson carved out of the history books his name, the most dominant champion of all time, a record that still to this day is seemingly going nowhere. For me, when I started watching the sport, he was the reason to tune into an event. Technically brilliant, defensively sound, but perhaps most importantly, seemingly unbeatable. The politics of the sport didn't concern me at the time, and well, to say I was surprised at the events to follow would be an understatement. In the background of Demetrious Johnson's historic title run, there was something far more sinister going on. The details of Johnson's mistreatment were brought to light in an open letter raised by DJ on June 5th, 2017. A 2,000-word breakdown of the mistreatment that Johnson had faced whilst champion in the organisation, from failure to promote their greatest athlete.
Sean and Dana have confirmed UFC's lack of desire to put any effort into promoting us.
Threatening to shut down the division.
A couple of years ago, we were actually talking about getting rid of the division.
No pay-per-view points.
Deny giving me any future pay-per-view points for all my future flyweight fights.
And forcing him to take fights that made no sense.
Dana angrily told me that I am fighting TJ.
For an organisation that professes its professionalism and intent on legitimising the sport, why were they so ready to scorch the division to a smouldering pile of ashes? Well, business often lacks moral choices, and the UFC puts money well before the sport itself. Demetrious Johnson's time at the UFC was coming to an end, and despite the call from DJ to have an honest conversation about the mistreatment of his career, the UFC never got back to him. A year goes by, DJ loses the belt in a controversial split decision to Cejudo, and well, what happens next was unprecedented.
Ben Askren to be traded to the UFC in exchange for Demetrious Johnson.
Demetrious Johnson just left the UFC and went over to ONE FC.
People are like, I feel bad for DJ, but let's be clear right off the top. You're really happy about this, correct?
Yeah, I'm extremely happy.
He's going to be fighting in an organization where he can knee a grounded opponent.
I think to be considered one of the best to ever do it or best in this sport is you got to compete all around the world.
Although the future of the flyweight division is now imperiled.
One Championship is truly the home of martial arts. It's not just mixed martial arts. They have kickboxing, Muay Thai.
He loves the idea of starting new in a new organization.
DJ was finally free, and he was headed to Singapore. The West may have dominated the combat sports scenes with the rise of the UFC, but as all combat fans know, the spiritual home of martial arts is in the East, and for ONE Championship, they have owned that space for over a decade now. Rising from the ancestral ashes of Pride and Dream, the CEO of ONE wanted to give to the fans an organisation that not only showcased the honour and skill of the sport's greatest athletes, but to do so in a way that would put on a showcase of talent, prowess and respect. ONE Championship events can include Muay Thai, grappling, kickboxing, and MMA. From contender fights to title fights to tournament system Grand Prix that harken back to the blood-infused, one-night gladiator-esque evenings of Pride and Dream. And Demetrious was there to cement his legacy. He understood that to be considered the greatest of all time, then facing those warriors in the East is the only way to prove it. And if there are any doubts as to the level of competition that ONE had on its roster, then just looking at what happened to Demetrious's peers in their transitions speaks for itself. But losing wasn't exactly something that worried DJ at this point.
Wins and losses happen in mixed martial arts, but at the end of the day, I hope you can be focused on taking care of what matters most, which is your family.
Despite those peers who had stumbled before him, Demetrious was not deterred, and that new beginning looming on the not-so-distant horizon brought with it an interesting and dramatic road to the ultimate goal of ONE flyweight world champion, a 3-stage Grand Prix with 8 men in contention for the tournament belt, and ultimately a shot at the man atop the division. Demetrious's mindset going into the first bout in the East was focused and realistic of the challenge that awaited him.
Because of who you are and because of what you did in the UFC, that you're just gonna come in here and run through this draw. But I don't imagine that you're taking it that way, right?
No, not at all. That's the perception on North America audience, is that even when the true fans of mixed martial arts, they know that there's a bigger world out there than just the UFC, Bellator, PFL.
Alright guys, watch out for headbutt. A low blow back of the head and spine. I want to clear up that fight. Touch glove if you want.
A long and arduous 2019 culminated in the ultimate prize of a new belt and a shot at the one flyweight champion. DJ would join those peers before him who had pioneered the sport, collecting tournament and Grand Prix belts in Asia those long decades ago. The likes of Dan Henderson, Fedor Emelianenko and Wanderlei Silva. It's a prestigious moment for any combat sports athlete that is often so lacking in the West.
I just like Grand Prix belts. I mean, it's just big and meaty and it's heavy and, you know. So for me, I almost want to call myself the belt collector, but.
One championship had not given DJ an easy ride to the title. Step after step down the ramp toward the cage, the greatest fighter of all time was knowingly waltzing into the shimmering haze of a battle that would further distance himself in the discussion of who the greatest was. Life is transient, but legacy is forever.
We both know the rules, fight fair, fight clean, temper if you want.
Staying out of reach of the hands of Demetrious, almost walked into a high knee there, did DJ. He got caught by Moraes. Throws a knee to the jaw. DJ's hurt. It's good night, Irene.
I'm so happy because Demetrious Johnson came to a championship, you know, like, and opened this door for me again, one more door. So it gave the opportunity to test myself against him. I love the rules of one championship, you know, I've been in one championship 8 years already.
Hey, goodbye, brother.
For Adriano Moraes, life would not provide an easy start. Abandoned at birth by his biological mother, Moraes was taken into the local orphanage before being adopted 3 years later by his mother, Mirtis Moraes. But life after being adopted wasn't any easier in the rough and violent streets of Brazil. From racism to gang fights, Adriano needed a new outlet to escape the harsh reality of his upbringing. And this is where he would find jiu-jitsu. It was a sport that would craft and mold one of the greatest flyweight competitors on earth. An avenue to escape a brutal childhood led Adriano not only to championship glory with one, but an 18-3 record and a dance with greatness. And in a beautiful display of warfare, Moraes would become the first fighter to finish the greatest MMA practitioner to have ever graced the canvas, and extending to 19 wins in his career. It's an inspiring story of not only resilience in the face of hardship, but also defiance to not fall victim to the same violent path Brazil so often extends to its lost youths. Back in the US, Demetrious, with time to reflect on the previous year, would be facing a shift in mentality, driven by more than just the loss of his fight.
After the first fight I had with him, I went through 2020 was a huge shift in my life, you know, that affected me. When I lost that first fight to him, I wasn't mad about losing. I was mad about I put so much pressure on myself about being perfect. This is where it kind of stemmed from. So I was getting ready for a fight. My sister, she died, and then seeing her pass, and then seeing basically the end game of life, right? Like being there and seeing her just like, she's there, and then seeing her go through the trauma, and then her being gone, and then seeing the traumatic, how it affected my mom. Like I called Matt, I was like, hey, I'm not gonna be in training today. I gotta go bury my sister, right? And I took a step back and I was like, man, I'm always training for a fight. Everybody's so worried about winning and losing. Why? Why?
Because you're gonna die someday.
You're gonna die someday.
Faced with not only the first finished loss of his career, but the impact of his sister's death finally catching up with him, it all served as a catalyst to fuel a mindset change. To let go of being perfect, to rescind the ego. Wins and losses would become fleeting moments of ecstasy or misery. Yes, legacy is forever, but death is the great equalizer. Belts will rust, memories will fade, but life is now. family is here, and living within this moment is the only truth. Without the weight of great expectations, the obsession with perfection, Johnson was finally free. Demetrious would live by the words he protested when entering into one, stating that no title shot is earned by the sake of a name, and felt that although he could ask and receive an immediate rematch, that he would instead earn himself the shot by plunging himself in the fires of another would-be challenger.
After I lost to him, because there's other guys in the division, Yuya Wakamatsu, Kairat Akhmatov, those two guys were kind of on a win streak, and you know me, I'm by the code. Right? It's like you lose, take your ass back down to the ladder, work your way back up, give the other guys opportunities to get a chance to fight for the belt.
Well, that's what he thought. One championship, however, had other plans. One that would bring a fresh new take to the combat sports world. A hybrid fight with one of the most flashy, devastating and technical Muay Thai fighters of all time. The current one flyweight Muay Thai world champion. A man who had accumulated 250 wins in the game by the age of 21. The man is a wrecking ball in the cage and a guaranteed showman. His name? Rodtang. But this wasn't any ordinary fight. Rounds 1 and 3 would be Muay Thai, 2 and 4 MMA. The question was, would DJ be able to survive the onslaught of the first round? That infamous barrage of violence that was well known to spew out of Rodtang? Or would he survive to the second round and show what it means to mix all martial arts? Well, there was only one way to find out.
Get into the second round of action.
And as the taste of victory washed away that sour flavour of defeat that had clung to the palate of Johnson for the last 3 months, there was another man who was fighting in the arena that very same night. A haunting visage, a remnant from DJ's past. Two men were showered in victory that night, both walking the streets of Singapore with another win notched into their deepening legacy. And so there was only one natural progression from this point, the rematch. A chance for these two men to determine who the best was. A chance of redemption for DJ. And for Moraes, a moment to show that greatness is not determined overnight, but through patience, hard work and grit. It was a night to show that determination to stay in the game despite losses is what separates champions from contenders. What was on the line could not be overstated for these two men, and the East would play host to a rematch for the ages.
Tomorrow night, you have the opportunity to not only avenge your loss, but take his title.
Tomorrow, I get an opportunity to exact revenge, and it's a storyline in my arc for redemption. So tomorrow, coming on with a brand new belt and let's go!
It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
You both know the rules, fight fair, fight clean, touch grave.
Strategy in this round. Oh, big right, DJ!
fact is, the fight game is often not so cut and dry. Its stories intersplice, no good nor evil, only winners and losers. That cold-pressed reality leaves its stinging mark, amplified by the inspiring tales that flutter in and out of mind, of racism, of abuse, death, life and dreams. And as the coarse canvas of the ring's floor plays host to two men, each with a tale of struggle, pain, suffering and hope, we try to dissect the dichotomy at play, the wicked game of glory and defeat. And whether they are fighting for family, money or fame, it doesn't matter when the ring chimes, it's a call to destiny. In those moments of battle, the subtle nuances of each feint, twitch and movement of the opponent grip the heightened senses of each fighter, both waiting for the opportune moment to unleash a strike to end the conflict. Whether it's an orphan rising from nothing, intent on claiming back the belt that offered him and his newfound family freedom from suffering, or the greatest combat athlete in the sport who aims to eliminate any would-be claimants to his throne, the fight game will remain its ruthless and beautiful, unforgiving self, and deliver onto us one winner and one loser. So what does fate have in store for these two men? We can't be certain, but US soil will host an historic event, a consequential rubber match, and the American arrival of one championship in Denver. Their ring will welcome those competitors whose face is marred by dust, blood and sweat, those practitioners who aim to strive valiantly. We will watch as these two men attempt another great victory.